Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. This podcast is all about our journey into the woods of ourselves, getting to know who we are, and where we're going in life so that we can create the life that we want to live. It's about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. It's also about mindset. Our beliefs are such an important part of this journey, and there are so many ways for us to change our mindset so that we can more easily live a life of expansive joy. This podcast is also about going literally into the woods and spending time in nature, and how that can help us on our own personal journey of self-knowledge. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now let's get into this week's episode. Hello, adventurers, and welcome to the Into the Woods podcast, episode 483. This is your host, Holly Wharton, and I'm back with another exciting guest. This week, I'm talking with Erica Terblanche. I'm super excited to introduce her. Erica was very recently introduced to me by Eric Deeter, who was a guest on the show on episode 368. You'll hear us saying, "Thanks, Eric," in this episode, and that's who we're talking about. If you haven't listened to his episode, you can go back and listen to that. I've got the link in the show notes, and you will probably enjoy it. In that episode, we talk about how to use the ultramarathon mindset to get your epic life. So in this week's show, Erica and I talk about how nature helps us to unlock our highest potential. We also discuss the cost of being disconnected from nature, mentally, physically, and emotionally. So who is Erica Terblanche? Erica is a life and well-being coach and has a popular weekly feature on Mix FM on the science of well-being and how people can build resilience in scientifically validated ways. She has a degree in psychology, a master's in positive psychology from the University of East London in the UK, and several international coaching qualifications that enable her to work with individuals, and especially within teams. She has 20 years of corporate experience at Exco and board level in financial services, and holds an MBA from the University of Cape Town. She is also a well-known and accomplished endurance athlete, having won some of the world's most grueling multi-day races, and she's the author of the much-acclaimed memoir, Run for the Love of Life, which also made it to the exclusive book's top recommended list for nonfiction only 3 months after she published the book. Eric is also the founder of Teach a Girl to Fish and Thrive Guru, both businesses helping people to unlock their highest personal potential, well-being, and happiness, especially through combining psychology and nature immersion. She has a unique angle on motivational speaking, blending her corporate experience with the lessons from extreme distance running with the science of what makes life worthwhile to inspire, equip, and motivate people to take that next step in their lives. So what are we going to discuss in today's episode? We talk about why is it important for us to even try to unlock our highest potential? Like, why should we bother? How nature can help us unlock our highest potential, the cost of being disconnected from nature, practical things we can start doing to reconnect with nature, and finally, how to use our adventures to unlock our highest potential. I really hope you enjoy this episode. I know I talk a lot about nature connection, but Erica has a very different perspective, I think, and she puts it into words that different from how I talk about it. So I think this is really interesting and useful. So I hope you enjoy this week's episode. Hello, Erica. How are you doing today?
Hello. I'm doing really well because
Good.
I think I'm talking to a kindred spirit. So.
I agree. So why don't you start out by telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Right. A lot of things, as much as possible, mostly outdoors. Please.
Yes.
So Holly, just maybe as background, I'm a positive psychologist and a psychologist. So positive psychology is really focusing in on where psychology focuses from -10 to 0 on the mental health continuum. So just helping people to not be ill. Positive psychology really delves into how do we as human beings thrive? How do we become the best that we can be? So the 0 to 10 on the scale of well-being, happiness, and thriving. And what really attracts me to it so much is that it's so science-based. And it's actually the habits, practices, and mindsets that help us to become the best we can be, scientifically validated, peer-reviewed, stuff that works. So I'm a positive psychologist. I also spent 20 years in corporate strategy, working in offices with overhead lighting in small little blocks of open plan boxes with no natural light from Monday to Friday, basically sitting for 8 to 10 hours, 12 hours a day. And I understood so deeply how that doesn't serve us. Even if the work may be very interesting, the conditions of it is so bad for us. So spend 20 years in stocks and chains. So really understand what we are coping with in corporate environments. And then I think first and foremost, so I'm telling things in order of passion, I suppose. So, but primarily I'm a wilderness child. I grew up on a farm. The first time I went on my first expedition, long expedition, was when I was 1.5 years old, still in diapers. And I disappeared. My first 3-kilometer hike,
Oh.
crawl hike. And I think from then on, the wanderlust and the wonder for nature has been so profound in my life. So I'm a trail runner. I've run in all the big deserts of the world, and I've won a lot of the 7-day. I love those 7-day adventures where it's absolute minimalism, carry everything on your back. Won many of those, including a race in the Sahara and the Atacama in Turkey, Grand to Grand in Utah. So spent many years trail running, and before that spent many years adventure racing, because if you really want to be immersed in nature, gosh, that's the way to go.
Yeah.
Don't sleep for 5 days and 5 nights and just find your way out there. And then in parallel with this, with the psychology and working in corporate and the nature immersion stuff, I really began to understand how much nature can help us to cope better, to live better, to be more healthy, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. And so I started a business in the UK called Teach a Girl to Fish. And fundamentally, it's really a kayaking business in Greece. So we go on these 5-day expeditions, and it's extraordinary. I worked out a whole positive psychology experience for it. And every time we get onto those kayaks, I throw it overboard, because nature does the work for me. I don't have to lift a finger. We don't have to do goal setting, or the work happens by the force and rhythm and how nature carries us. And then in South Africa, I've got a business called Thrive Guru. And that's where I now combine my corporate work with the positive psychology. And wherever I get a chance to motivate boards, excos, teams to get out in nature, because actually when you move your body in the outdoors, creativity improves by hundreds of percentages, productivity improves. So I guess I'm many things, and I'm also a writer, motivational speaker, and I've just written my first book, Run for the Love of Life, and it's doing really well in South Africa. I've not really marketed it overseas, so I'm very grateful for this podcast, and because this is how we're beginning to get people aware of the book. But that's in a nutshell. I think I'll stop there.
It's a lot of things.
I've lived a long time. I'm 51 years old, and I expect, like Eric, to become 120.
Sounds good. So we're here today to talk about how we can unlock our highest potential. Why do you think this is important?
Okay, so I think there are really there's two big reasons. And the first one is a philosophical one, because we've been given this gift of our one precious life.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost, think of it as an energy package that lasts for X number of years. And it is such a profound gift to have this. And I think I said to you before, even in my lowest moments, I try and remember I think it's memento mori, remember death. And the Stoics talk about it a lot, because if you understand how precious every day is, how precious every moment is, and not feel entitled to one's life, one engages with it differently. And, Holly, if you're going to go and do something, why not enjoy it? Why not make the most of it? So that's on the philosophical side. And then on the psychological side, we know that human beings are autotelic, and that we are goal-oriented and goal-driven. And to have good goals for your life and meaningful goals, and we know that those meaningful goals are really about self-actualization, but not just for the purposes of making the most of who you can become, but self-actualizing so that you can have a better, wider, and more profound ripple effect in the world around you. Again, it's not an idea of being grandiose or why am I important in the world, but rather whose life do I have meaning for, in meaning and purpose. So being autotelic, in positive psychology, we also talk about being the heliotropic effect, which I love because it says that human beings tend to move towards an envisaged future. And if you can be very clear about how you can become the very best that you can be in this life and have that as a vision for yourself and why that is important for those around you, that's a very powerful way to live. And why not? You can choose to grovel around in the mud, or you can choose to fly.
Yeah, I was online the other day and this person asked, why is everyone always talking about like personal development and personal growth and like achieving goals? Like, what if I just want to sit on my couch and watch TV and play video games every day? And I was just thinking, I mean, it's your life. Like, you can choose to do that, but like, I don't know. Like, that has never occurred to me as being like sufficient. Like I'm always kind of going after new things and setting goals. And like, it just blew my mind to think that like for someone that would just be enough. And of course, we don't know that person. Maybe they're depressed. Maybe they have issues, but I don't know. I just thought, my God, I can't, that would depress me. Like, I can't imagine living that life.
Completely. However, it depends what. I mean, if you would have to lock me up in an asylum within 1 week to live like that,
Yeah.
because then the wind would out my sails. I wouldn't be able to have the joie de vivre, the excitement, the inspiration for life, and even the appreciation and the gratitude that is associated with that. And we know gratitude is a big boat. And the more that you engage with your life and not just squander it away, I think the more attenuated you become to that deep gratitude for this moment of life, electric life pulsing through your body. You're alive. What a freaking miracle. However, what I do want to say is that I'm also doing a lot of work to try and understand real deep equanimity. So, and when I mean equanimity, I mean not being attached to an outcome, but still caring deeply, but not being attached. So, here is something else. If one could get to a place where you are able to sit perhaps in a cave alone and meditate for 10 years on your own quietly and need very little else to feel that incredible joie de vivre, that gratitude, that connectedness. That is a great place to go to, but I don't think it's the same place as sitting playing video games all day. But if you got through that process of deep meditation, letting go of terse holding on to goals, because I think holding on too tightly can be equally damaging. And I know you know this. When I first lay my eyes on you, I know you know this gentle holding of high goals that matter a lot to you, but holding it in a way that if the wind were to whisper it out of your fingers, you would say, oh, well, perhaps it wasn't meant today. Let me do something else. I think it's really important, even in running, racing, in high performance, to almost step into those places with curiosity. Doesn't matter what happens. And an equanimity. And there is unbelievable power in that, to not be fragile and holding on too tightly. Yeah, you better stop me. I can ramble on for hours.
No, absolutely. So what's been your personal experience with unlocking your potential? What's that journey been like for you?
Right. It's very interesting. I only discovered actually what the secret sauce was when I started writing Run for the Love of Life, because I didn't know what that seminal moment was. So I grew up in a home with my mum, especially, is very interested in the world, in life, in learning. She's an eternal student. And I think I absorbed that from her. So always been exposed to many, many different things and so forth. But I think I learned this skill of equanimity from my mum, to not be driven for the sake of performance, not be driven for the sake of winning, but to be driven for the sake of understanding, for knowing. And then, like everybody else, I went to university, I got a degree, got a job, I moved to a city very far away from the coast. I left my hiking boots behind and became perhaps the unhealthiest I was in my entire life in terms of lifestyle. And then some happenings in my life brought me to a place where actually I got divorced. And in the divorce, I had this unbelievably deep hunkering back to nature, because I used to hike a lot when I was young. And I discovered adventure racing as a sport. Gosh, Holly. And the moment I did my first 100-kilometer race, actually, I started with a 100-kilometer race, 24 hours. And that's where my greatest growth began. Because as I started doing adventure racing and going through the night in these kind of extreme races, up to 5 days and 5 nights with no sleeping, interestingly enough, my career improved dramatically and I became very successful in my career. My relationships improved, my friendships improved, my health improved, and above all, my mental health improved. And and that was the very beginning of a big growth experience for me, a big growth spurt. And that just continued. And then, of course, you get drawn to psychology and understanding more. And then I did a master's in positive psychology to understand more. And so the growth is big, and I hope it never tops out. Every challenge is a growth opportunity, actually. Every pain point, actually, when you feel discomfort, when you feel pain, when you like, oh gosh, I can't carry on anymore, welcome it with open arms. That's it. That's the moment. That's the golden doorway. That's the growth. Yeah. So you become less scared of pain. You begin to understand that pain is not that scary and it's not that insurmountable. And you also begin to understand that pleasure, joy, and achievement is only temporary in its gratification. So again, this thing of equanimity, holding it lightly, both the pain and the pleasure.
Yeah, I think that's such a good story. Last year I ran my first 100K, or the only one I've done, but it completely shifted my perspective on what was possible for me. I remember sitting down with my journal the morning after the race because I wanted to write down like what went well, because it went really well. Like I had a really good time. And I thought, well, what did I do right to have such a good time? And so I was writing down the experience and I just paused for a minute. I just thought, that's a really long distance. Like if I ran 100 kilometers, what else could I do? Because a year before, I never would have thought I could have done that. So like it just really expanded my perspective of what I was capable of doing.
Completely. And that is so magical what you just said. And I think Eric also says this, it all begins in the imagination. But here's the juice of endurance sport. When you have experienced it in your body as such a profound truth of what you can actually do, because I'm sure there were moments where you were sore as anything else.
Oh, yeah.
Tired and struggling and fighting back, right? But despite that, you achieved the 100 kilometers. And then that truth lives in every single one of your cells. And then when you come back to your life, now that powerful arena opens of your willingness to dare imagine much, much greater things than you would have dared before. So that's very interesting. And it was my experience in the endurance racing as well. That continuous pushing of the boundaries beyond what you thought humanly possible. And then that flows back into your life. So you may have raced for in adventure racing, not slept for 3 days and 3 nights. And on Monday morning, you have to present to the board. And honestly, when you've now seen human nature in X-ray vision, you are not scared to present to the CEO of a FTSE 100 company, because what is there to hide from? And you can trust yourself, because for that 100-kilometer race, you showed up for yourself, and now you can trust yourself. In that adventure race, through the night, through the second night, the third night, you showed up, and now you know what you are made of, and you can trust yourself. And that, I think, is it makes me think of Paul Henry Thoreau's his whole series on Walden Pond. What did he call it?
Walden, yeah.
On Walden Pond, exactly. Self-sufficiency. And self-sufficiency starts with the deep belief that no matter what happens, I can and I will prevail. So that's what powerful. A gift. It's so powerful. And I think that's my mission now, is to get as many people as possible. And through the way I write also, I want people to access the unimaginable, but in their own blood and bones. I almost want to disappear out of the story, so that when they read the story, it's not my feet running, it's theirs.
So how can nature in particular help us to unlock our highest potential?
You, because we do not have a harness on that baby. No, 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 no. Actually, when I've mentioned teach a girl to fish, the kayaking business in Greece, and mostly the Asian Sea looks like a mirror, mostly. But sometimes not. Sometimes it looks like the Atlantic after a really big storm, or during, perhaps. Okay. And that's where the growth experiences come. After you've come for 5 days on a kayaking expedition and nature throws something unexpected at you, and you then are able to surmount the challenge. And it was an unexpected challenge. So it's something that you didn't anticipate. It came at you, and then you really were able to hold your own ground. There is a profound self-confidence that comes from being able to manage your own body, your own system, to manage your physiology, your survival in nature. And once people have tasted that, sometimes I've got people coming on my trip who never made a fire, never pitched a tent, never mind paddled 80 kilometers along a coastline. And at the end of that experience, I can see it, the way they walk. They walk 6 foot tall and they walk on water because they have tasted something in their own efficacy that I could not have engineered through whatever program or whatever experience. Nature decides and then makes us show up. And once you've shown up in that way. So I think that's one of the first ways that nature plays a profound role in our growth.
Absolutely.
And efficacy. Yeah, and maybe in a second way, the beautiful thing about nature is when you are out there, you realize actually, and when I say insignificant, I don't mean meaningless at all. Life almost takes on more meaning. But because you are in those wide, extraordinary spaces, we belong in the world in a very healthy way, in the network of living things. And within perspective, we're not the Uber being in charge of everything. We're not the subject of the social media. We are just there like an ant on a sand dune with the wide expanse of eternity everywhere around you. And I think that's so, so important to retain perspective on how small the struggles of your life actually are. Because that's what comes. It's not that you are an insignificant ant and you don't matter. No, it's actually the things that trouble me so deeply, the things that worry me, the things I fight against. Actually, they're very small in the scheme of things. I can relax. Everything's going to be okay. Look at this. I'm held in the web of life. So that for me is, and then the third thing is the spirituality of nature, because I cannot be out there without feeling so much closer. And you can call it what you want, the universe, the creative expression, God, whatever you want to call this presence when you're in nature. You know, people can say what they want. They can throw science at it or the absence of science at it or whatever. But when you stand out there, you feel something that's bigger than just yourself. And I think that helps us to grow also.
So what would you say is the cost of being disconnected from nature? Because I think a lot of people are really disconnected from nature.
Do you know, Holly, that's why I was so moved when I heard about your podcast and about when I was introduced via Eric. And thank you to him. I just want to say that.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah. When I heard about your passion for nature immersion and so forth, because as we more and more become urbanized, this nature disconnect is actually getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And we are like frogs in slowly heating water. We don't realize it. You know, very often when I do coaching, and we talk about many different things, breathing practices, meditation, blah, 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 then we get to the module on nature connection. And I can just see the delegates at the beginning of the session, their eyes are glazing over. They're like, oh, whatever. And very often people will say to me, darling, I'm a city girl, please. I don't do mud. You know, we have a good old chuckle because we talk then about the nature disconnect and that people are like, no, please, can I just have my croissant and coffee downstairs? Really good coffee. And I'm okay with concrete everywhere. I don't mind. And then I normally in my classes do a meditation where I ask people to just close their eyes and to imagine their most special place, their refuge, the place that they go to, their place. And what is it that they smell? What is the sensation on their skin? What is it that they see? What is it that they hear? Holly, I may have asked this of 1,000 people. I have never yet had anybody describe Oxford Street or New York or any cityscape whatsoever. People describe a burbling brook lying underneath a big tree in the dappled shade, feeling sunlight on their skin, feeling the breeze, hearing the birds, hearing the water, walking on the beach. And when people connect with this, and then obviously the exercises, you share it with your body, and then we share it in the bigger group, you can see two things that have happened. An enormous aha moment for most people of recognizing that longing that they so deeply have. And second of all, recognizing the deep disconnect. And you know, some of the most gratifying moments in my coaching is then a week or two later, I may be in the mountain and I may encounter one of my students, but he's not there alone. He brought his wife, all his kids, and his aunts and uncles. And they let me know that a year and a half later, once every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, the family goes for a weekend away. They choose nature holidays now. They go hiking in the mountains because we are so disconnected from nature and we don't know it. And then let's just talk about Dr. Richard Love on nature deficit disorder. Are you familiar with his work?
No, I'm not.
Please look him up. You will find a kindred spirit in him. Louv, Richard Love. And he coined the phrase nature deficit disorder. And he makes the claim that the massively rising levels of depression, obesity, ADHD. I mean, ADHD didn't exist when we were kids because we burnt it off in the trees and playing in the rivers and swimming. And he describes these epidemics of childhood difficulty and the rapid increases in it, directly relating it back to the fact that a child is 8 times more likely to spend time indoors on a screen than they are playing outside. And Dr. Richard Love talks about nature deficit disorder and this disconnect from nature as one of the primary reasons why our kids are sick and getting sicker. If you look at the social anxiety, the levels of depression, levels of suicide. I just spoke last week at a campus on a radio station because September in South Africa is suicide month on campus because the kids are sitting 14 hours a day. They're not getting out into the sun. They're not hiking, drinking too much. So nature can save our life. It can literally save our life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So my next question was going to be about why is this so important for children, but you already answered that. I think it is so important for, I don't have kids, but for people that do have kids and their families to get them outdoors and experiment with them. So what are some practical things that people can start doing? I think a lot of people that listen to this podcast are already outdoor adventure enthusiasts in some way or another, but how can we start taking our adventures and viewing them from that perspective of enabling us to unlock our highest potential or grow in some way?
Yeah. Look, I mean, personally, so there's 2 questions and there's the practical. And on the practical side, and I know people who listen to this podcast already do massively amazing adventure stuff, but it's also in our day-to-day. So in our day-to-day, when you take a break at work, to not sit out indoors and have your lunch at your computer, get your feet onto some grass, find a tree, get into sunlight. Especially, I mean, I don't know if you know this, but in the UK, they estimate that 60 to 68% of the population is vitamin D deficient. Office train, home, repeat. So we never get out into light. So really make it a habit and a practice. And also, if you're choosing holidays, it also help your budget. Try and do holidays that are outdoor focused because it heals so much more. And the time that you spend, if you just measure this and do an experiment. If you go on a city holiday, say maybe going to Stockholm for 3 days of sightseeing, or you go on a nature trip and you go hiking in the mountains for 3 days, in built up urban scapes, time contracts. In nature, somehow time elongates and you get that expansive feeling. And in positive psychology, a lot of the research points to how much more and how much faster we restore nature. Obviously, I'm sure many people have spoken about Shingi Riko. I think it's a Japanese forest bathing, where they actually take executives to go and rest. Because the research shows us if you're in forests or by the sea, your cortisol reduces rapidly. Your blood pressure reduces or regulates, your heart rate regulates. So all the health biomarkers improve radically faster in nature than it does in an urban landscape. So if you want to dump your stress, if you want to get rid of the anxiety of life as normal, get out into nature. It's the biggest bang for your buck. It's the fastest recovery. So that's the one answer on the practical side. On the other side, Holly, I'm going to completely just get in your slipstream there. Choose to do things that you are absolutely terrified of. Just go and pick something that scares the living daylights out of you and go for it. Just show up. You know, the only thing that can happen is you can fail and then you can learn a lot and try again. But stop under aiming for what your limitless potential is capable of. That is possibly the thing that I will say most. You know, I've just turned 51, and 2 weeks ago, I did a 110-kilometer trail race on Sunday and finished on Monday late in the night, and it was part of a charity thing. And normally the same week on the Sunday, I went to run Comrades, which is a 90-kilometer road race. And people taper for a month before this. The last week before Comrades, you don't dare do anything more for the week than 15 kilometers. You know, just keep it slow, keep it low. And as I stepped into this challenge, I knew it was probably not clever or wise, but I was curious to see what would happen if I just allowed myself to just shift the boundary a little bit and see what would happen. Yes, Comrades was really hard. It would have been much easier if I had tapered. What happened in the last 40 kilometers? The endurance engine came online, and there was almost no difference if I was fully rested and tapered for that race in the last one. So it was an experiment, and it was extraordinary again. And so my wish for people is just go and pick something that scares you. Go and pick something that will push your boundary out. Because when you do that, you grow into one CEO came to speak once, I'll never forget, and she said to our women's group, and she said, always put on a big dress, because what you will discover is that you're going to grow into it. So put on a big dress.
I love what you said about choosing things that you're terrified of, because I've been doing kickboxing for the last 7 years, and I'm hopefully going for my black belt in December. So I've been stepping up my training and going to like the extra sparring classes. And it's like every day I'm at home and I'm getting ready to get dressed and go to class and put on my uniform. And I think, oh, I'm kind of scared to go to class. And like, there's always a part of me that's like, oh, I could just stay home because I'm scared. And I drag myself out there and I go, and I am aware that I am growing, I am improving precisely because I'm going to the classes that I'm scared of, that have the more challenging people, because that's what's going to get me to the point where I might possibly be able to pass my grading, you know? So it's choosing to step outside of your comfort zone and do the things that scare you. I think that's so important that you said that.
That's so hardcore. That is so hardcore. It's full contact, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. Well, it's light contact. It's light contact. We've got like headgear and like pads and stuff, but you do get punched in the face quite hard. Like if you don't block it, you're getting hit.
And bruising and stuff.
I don't know if you can see my arm.
I didn't want to say I did see. So I wondered, is that a bike accident? What's happening?
No, that's kickboxing.
That's my sport. That is really hardcore. Okay.
And it's getting better, this bruise. It was really bad a couple days ago.
No, I really great respect. And I think also the discipline of that sport, showing up over and over and over again, that growth, you cannot overestimate the small incremental changes that happens and fundamentally shifts you. And you've been busy with this for 10 years, you said?
No, I started in 2015, so 7 years technically, but then there was the COVID year where classes weren't regular. And then last year I had a shoulder injury, so I couldn't do it at all. So really like 5 years.
Yeah, but 5 years showing up over and over and over again, it changes fundamentally who Holly Wharton is. Fundamentally. And what a gift. What a gift. God, I am always so inspired when I meet people like you, because it reminds me how precious life is. Do you know? And it reminds me there's always room for more growth. Stretch yourself.
Yes.
Because stretching is almost a way of honoring this great gift that we have been given. stretch, grow, put on your big dress. Don't be scared to be kicked.
Yeah, I wouldn't wear my dress to kickboxing, but yeah.
No. But
So, Erica, tell us about your books. You've got a book called Run for the Love of Life. Tell us about that. What's that about?
okay, so it's not what it exactly says on the can. It does seem like it may be. So it's a book about running. So running is almost, in the book, I talk about these 7-day endurance races in the desert and what happens on these races and the low down and dirty, really behind the scenes. And I actually wrote mostly about the races where I didn't win, because those were the ones
Where you learn.
Hey, those are the ones where there's learning and much more excitement, because there's some stuff going on, things go wrong and so forth, but learning really. So then I describe these desert races, but the running is just an exciting carrier for a book that is about life. It's a book about love. It's a book about loss, about forgiveness, about unity, about camaraderie, about nature connection, about gratitude. It's really, at the essence of it, a book about never, ever giving up on your life. No matter what happens to you, we are not victims. We have agency. And no matter what bad thing happens to you, even the worst, you can transform even the worst circumstance into something that helps you to become a better human being, if you choose it. So that's what the book is about. And, a lot of people write back and say that the book has meant a lot to them. It's either got them starting running or recommenced their running after being sick, or just giving them courage to, like, I can see this is your mantra, push the boundary, to push the boundary of yourself, because you are capable of so much more than what you think. So the book inspires people to do that. And a lot of people say they read the book literally in one sitting because it just grips them. And I think the biggest compliment of the book is that they experience their own agency and their own story through mine. That's what makes me happy, because the book is not about me. And a lot of people say it's completely devoid of ego, which is exactly, thank God for that. So that it becomes a carrier that somehow stirs people's wings a little bit, so that at the end of the book, they can't sit still and they take off too. So yeah, that's what it's about. And it's available on Amazon, and it's available in print and obviously ebook.
Great. Well, we'll link to that in the show notes so people can buy that and check it out. So, Erica, thank you so much for joining us today. Where can people find you online and learn more about what you do?
Right. So people can find me on my website, www.thrive-guru.com, or you can subscribe to my Instagram at Erica_Terblanche. That's Erica with a C. Or you can find me on Facebook under the same Erica Terblanche. Or if you want, and if you do not yet have a running or moving practice, I have taken 20 years of learning in distance running, and I've developed a couch to 3 kilometer and a couch to 5 kilometer and a couch to 10 kilometer program that anybody can download for free off the Thrive Run Club in Facebook, the Thrive Run Club. And it's designed for you to download it. And if you get 2 or 3 friends together, you can literally become the coach. It's written in such a way. And it's almost a program that guarantees to get to those distances with joy, injury-free, and in a way that will make sure that you continue, that you fall in love with it and not loathe it. And so glad it's over after 10 weeks.
Sounds like a plan. Well, thank you so much for your wisdom and your tips and your inspiration. It's been a pleasure.
Lovely. And I'm going to go look for your book, Alone on the South Downs Way, because I love that area. Absolutely love that area of England. So wonderful, Holly. What a privilege to talk to you. Please keep doing this good work, because I think as we urbanize more and more, and as we become a more and more digital, virtual humanity, this work of keeping us connected to nature, I think is going to become increasingly important. And I hope you get to the kids also. So thanks for doing the work that you do.
Well, thank you. Please drop me a line and let me know what you thought about this week's episode. You can email me at holly@hollywharton.com or find me online and get in touch there. If you enjoyed this episode, you might want to check out these related ones. 468, as I mentioned earlier, I talk with Eric Deeter about how to use the ultramarathon mindset to get your epic life. 369, I talk about Getting out of your comfort zone with outdoor adventures. 368, I talk with Yvette Webster about how to take your hiking to the next level. 361, I talk with Cara Wild about how to take the brakes off your personal growth. Finally, 333, I talk about mindset, and I ask the question, do you have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset? So, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. It would mean the world to me. Next week's episode will probably be a solo show, but I haven't recorded that yet, so who knows? In the meantime, remember to visit hollywharton.com/483 for the show notes on this episode. Thank you so much for listening, and happy trails to you. Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollywharton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.